You grew up without the internet, but now you live in a world controlled by it. Two completely different worlds. And you were forced to adapt. You remember a time when things were slower, simpler, more predictable. But now everything moves fast, constant, always changing. And because of that, you don't fully relate to either world. You're not fully Gen X, and you're not fully millennial either. This group is often called Xennials, and most people in this group feel different, even if they can't explain why. This isn't personality. It's the result of how their environment shaped their thinking long before they noticed it. Xennials grew up during a time of constant change. They saw the world shift rapidly, from analog to digital, from stability to uncertainty. Nothing stayed the same for long. Sometimes there was structure, and sometimes there wasn't. In some moments, there were clear rules and expectations. In others, they had to figure things out on their own. So they learned to rely on themselves, not as a mindset, but as a necessity. When support feels inconsistent, independence becomes the safest option. They grew up between two worlds. One world was slower, more predictable. The other became fast, digital, and constantly changing. And they had to adapt to both. So their identity became flexible. They learned to adjust quickly, to observe before reacting, to move between different ways of thinking without fully settling into one. Independence became automatic. Handling things alone stopped feeling unusual. It became the default response to uncertainty, and relying on others started to feel uncertain. Even when support exists, the brain hesitates because it wasn't always reliable before. Over time, this becomes a pattern. What starts as adaptation slowly becomes identity, and identity shapes behavior. The brain stops expecting consistency. Instead of relying on external stability, it shifts inward. Control becomes internal, so emotions are processed internally. Instead of expressing everything outwardly, feelings are controlled, contained, and handled alone. Because when you grow up adapting to everything, you also learn not to expect anything to stay the same. This is where the shift becomes permanent. Stability feels uncertain, even when it exists. On the outside, they seem fine, calm, capable, independent. They know how to function in almost any situation, but internally, there is pressure. Constant adaptation creates quiet exhaustion, always adjusting, always carrying responsibility, because adapting to everything means holding everything, and not everything was meant to be carried alone. Xennials are not broken. What looks like distance is often awareness. What looks like independence is learned survival. They were shaped by a world in transition, a world that changed faster than most people realize, and their minds adapted to keep up with it. And once you understand that, it starts to make sense, because what feels like confusion is often just unrecognized adaptation, and that's where clarity begins.